Pete Alonso has proven to be one of the best sluggers in baseball. Now just 2 years away from free agency, is it time for the Mets to lock up the polar bear? That's what we're going to discuss on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, Pete Alonso is coming off a fantastic season. Played in 160 games, only missed one because of an injury, the final game of the season. He hit 40 home runs. He scored 95. He drove in an NL leading 131 runs. He stole a career high 5 bases. But you look at the strikeout rate year over year, that rate has dropped, showing him being a more disciplined hitter. As a rookie, he was at 26.4%, down to 25.5% in the shortened season. Last year, second full year, got that strikeout rate just below 20 at 19.9, and then this past season, 18.7%, so that is a fantastic improvement. The average, a career high at 271, 352 on base, 518 slugging. We look at WRC+, which is weighted runs created plus, measuring your hitters based on a league average of 100. He is at 143, or he hit at a 143 WRC+ for the 2022 campaign. Since he made his debut in 2019, Pete Alonso leads Major League Baseball in two pretty important statistics: home runs and RBIs. You can say that Pete Alonso is the most consistent run-producing slugger in the game. He is out there. He is an Iron Man. I mean, he's only missed, he missed one game first year, 3 games in the second season there in 2020, so that's 4. Missed 8 in 2021, so that's 12. 14 games across 4 seasons. That's really impressive. And he's also improved defensively. This year, the numbers did fall off from where they were a little bit in 2021, as well as some improvements we had seen previously in 2019. 2020 was a bad season for him defensively, considering the playing time, and he ended up playing a lot of DH that year. But look, what Pete Alonso has done is he has not made himself a liability anymore at first base. He has made himself an average defender over there. He's going to give a good target to his fielders. He's always pretty clean scooping the ball. I think that is maybe the most important thing for a first baseman that defensive metrics really don't grade out on very much. Those are usually more range-based, so you have to always take the first base metrics with a grain of salt. We know he defends the hell out of that line. And sometimes he gets a little bit over anxious trying to do too much, going to his right. And that'll be interesting to see if that comes back even more next year with the elimination of the shift. But again, the bottom line here, the guy's going to go out every season. He's going to hit 40 home runs. He's going to drive in 100, and he's going to be someone that can actually fend himself pretty well out in first base. He's no longer a liability you're worried about. So that's all you can ask for this guy. He is remarkably valuable to the Mets. He is becoming a leader with each year. You see the maturity grow, and he did debut at 24, so a little bit further along age-wise than maybe some other of his contemporaries who've had similar, service time at the big league level. So it really puts an interesting situation in front of the Mets here, because this is the type of player that you continue to build your franchise around. And Francisco Lindor is the one position player that's locked up to a long-term deal. I spoke on Friday's show about Jeff McNeil. I think that is an absolute no-brainer that the Mets should try to extend him, especially when you consider, his age as well. where he's at when it comes to arbitration, 2 years left, and that McNeil can really be had on a bargain of a contract. Pete Alonso is getting to that point where he's starting to make really good money in arbitration. And so there could be a great incentive for him to play this thing out and get the free agency. But if you want to secure him as your guy, this is the last real chance to do it, because if you don't do it going into the 2023 season, you let him play this year out, one, you have no idea how well he could fare, and if he hits 50 home runs and finishes in the top 5 in the MVP voting, well, that arbitration number is going to get that much higher, leverage is going to get that much smaller, but also, you're talking about a year left at that point, and this is a guy that in his last year of arbitration, there's a good chance he makes north of $15 million, if not close to $20 million. So there's going to be almost no incentive for Pete Alonso to sign a contract extension beyond this offseason. And that's what we're going to discuss next. This is the time to extend Pete Alonso, but how rich will that contract get? Could we cross over to $200 million, or could the Mets find an agreement a little bit south of that? We're going to get to that in just a minute, but first, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from basketball to football to soccer and esports. They've got it all at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. BetOnline is always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. You can bet on futures when it comes to MLB free agents. If Justin Verlander does not sign with the Astros, who's the favorite to land him? None other than the Mets at plus 375, then the Yankees at plus 400, the Dodgers at plus 450, the Giants at plus 500, and the Rangers at plus 600. If you want to bet on this and more, head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action. Bet online, where the game starts. Now, how much money will Pete Alonso command on a contract extension? This is really tough to decide. And actually, if you go back to December of last year, I did a whole podcast on a Pete Alonso contract extension following the 2021 campaign. And the deal I ended up coming to was a 10-year, $190 million deal that I tied to incentives based on home runs hit. I thought that would be a creative way to get Alonso to sign on the dotted line. Because you still had 3 years of control to leverage with, I felt like the Mets could get him just below $20 million, making it a steal of a contract. $19 million per would have locked up his final 3 years of arbitration plus 7 years of free agency. Would have been fantastic for both sides. Now, you add another year of great production from Pete, and you put him a year closer to free agency. So it's really tough to gauge how much that contract I originally projected makes sense, as opposed to where things are at now, where maybe Alonso's going to command a little bit more when it comes to AAV, and you could be talking about a shorter than 10-year deal. Maybe this is an 8-year contract, but I was trying to find comps, and a year ago, the two comps I found was Freddie Freeman, and this was his contract with the Braves, and Joey Votto. Similar comps this year, but we'll use Freddie Freeman's new contract. So first off, you got the Votto deal. This was heading into his age 28 season, the exact same season that Pete Alonso is heading into. He signed a 10-year, $225 million deal. That's $22.5 million per season. Matt Olson last year signed an 8-year, $168 million deal. So that one came in at $21 million per on that extension. You have Freddie Freeman, who signed with the Dodgers last offseason, $162 million over 6 years. That is $27 million per. So high end is $27 million, but that is the type of number that Alonso could expect if he got to free agency. On the lower end, you got Matt Olson at 21, and then you also have Votto at 22.5. Granted, that was years ago that he signed that extension. I think that a contract that could get a deal done, because of how much Pete Alonso loves being with the Mets, I could actually see him signing this contract. And last year it was 10 for 190. This year I'm coming in at 8 for 180. So that is $22.5 million per. That's what Votto made over 8 years instead of 10. So that's going to take him all the way through his age 35 season, if I'm not mistaken. 83. Yes. Okay. And here's the two differentiating factors here. I think that for this contract, the Mets can put an opt-out after year 5. Now, that would allow him to hit free agency after his age 32 season. So there is a chance that he could then hit free agency again and take another big bite at the apple and maybe get 3 or a 4-year deal at that stage of his career worth bigger money than he'd be making right now. An 8-year deal, though, would buy out the final 2 years of his arbitration and 6 years of free agency. When you look at how much money he's projected to make right now, it has him going at Spotrac from $7.4 million this past year in arbitration to $12.4, so a $5 million bump. If he was to get another $5 million bump the following year, that'd be $17.4, so you'd be within sniffing distance of $30 million over the next 2 years. So if instead you're looking at, let's say, $40 million over the next 2 years, and then you get to your free agent years, so 6 years of free agency at $140 million. Let's calculate what the AAV on his free agent years would be. You are looking at $23.3 million, a little more than Votto got. Again, his was over a 10-year extension, so when again, it'd be the exact same number, but I'm just talking about the free agent years. You're looking at less than what Freeman is getting at the $27 million, but not bad. Let's even just take this to another degree here. Let's say it's $40 million the first 2 years of the contract, and let's bump up the 6 free agent years to a full $24 million. Then you're talking about $144, so then maybe it's 8 years, $184 million, something along those lines. You can tie incentives to home runs if you want to. That's a great way to incentivize a guy like Pete. Hey, he always does well in the home run derby. Give him $1 million when he gets to 35 homers, 40, 45, 50, whatever it is. I can see all these things being worked into a contract, but the general framework is a contract that'll be probably between 20 and 25 million. And you could say anywhere from, I think, 8 to 10 years, maybe 7. But if you're Pete Alonso and you're trying to think about the contract, would you want a contract that's only going to take you through your age 34 season? I think the incentive to sign now really lies in getting as many years as possible. You're under control for 2. If you're to play out those 2 years and hit free agency after his age 29 season, heading into his age 30 season, very realistic to think that he could get a 7-year deal still. So with that in mind, maybe he would want to get 8, 9, 10 is where I'm thinking. So again, I think at least 20, up to 25 million per season, and then between 8 to 10 years. That's a general framework of where a contract could fall for Pete Alonso. And the reason you do it is because, A, you lock him into a lower number now than you'd have to pay if he hit free agency. If Pete Alonso goes out the next 2 years, hits 90 home runs in those 2 seasons, is an all-star both years, maybe finishes on the top 5 of MVP voting 1 year, wins a Silver Slugger or 2, then gets to hit free agency, suddenly you're looking at the $27 million that Freddie Freeman got as a low-end baseline for a guy that probably, if he does hit 90 home runs, would continue to be the best home run hitter in baseball since his debut, probably the top RBI guy as well. He hits the market with that resume. 27 is not outlandish at all for him. And you might find another team that gives him an 8-year deal. Suddenly, to match Pete Alonso, let's just say you don't do anything, right? You let this play out. Let's say he makes $30 million in arbitration. And then he hits free agency, commands a 7-year deal at 27. That's $189 million. You add on the 30, you're looking at $219 for 9 years, where you could maybe get that exact same contract signed right now at, let's see, you could be saving $15 to $20 million, I'd say, over the life of the deal. Whether that's worth it to the Mets or not is to be seen, but it's also about keeping this guy in a Mets uniform for the rest of his career. And again, those numbers can escalate even further, making this even more of a no-brainer to sign him because that contract can snowball on you quickly. We're seeing it happen currently with Brandon Nimmo and Jacob deGrom in free agency. But could Pete Alonso, if signed, become the greatest Mets position player of all time? I'm going to dive into those numbers in just a minute. Before we get to that, though, today's episode is brought to you by SimpliSafe. Did you know that over the holidays, property crimes like burglaries and package thefts spike nationally? That's why our friends at SimpliSafe Home Security are offering 50% off their award-winning security system so that more families can feel safe and secure this holiday season. SimpliSafe was named the best home security system of 2022 by U.S. News & World Report for the third year in a row. In an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe to capture critical evidence and verify that the threat is real so you get a priority police response. SimpliSafe is whole home security with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door, HD security cameras for inside and out, smarter ways to detect motion that alerts you not only when a threat is real, but even having hazard sensors that can detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. With the top-rated SimpliSafe app, you can stay in complete control of your system anytime, anywhere. You can arm or disarm. You can unlock for a guest, access your camera, or adjust the system settings. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system I would recommend. Get 50% off any new SimpliSafe at simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. This is their biggest discount of the year. Don't wait. That's simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Could Pete Alonso go down as the best position player in franchise history? He's got a shot, okay? First of all, I think the slugger mantle, he's already in the conversation. I mean, he's right there with Mike Piazza and Darryl Strawberry. He hasn't done it as long as those guys did in a Mets uniform, or even David Wright. But you look at the career slugging percentage, he's second all time for the Mets, 7 points behind Mike Piazza, his .535 slugging compared to Piazza at .542. You look at, Strawberry in comparison, he's 15 points behind Alonso, and that says a lot, considering Strawberry's career, that Alonso could slug that much more than him. He's third best all-time in OPS behind John Olerud, which is a smaller sample size, and Piazza. And then you look at his 146 home runs. In short order, he is very close, almost within 100 of Strawberry at 252. So if you give him 3 more seasons, and Pete Alonso is averaging, at least 40 a year. He had 37 in 2021, 40 this year. You look at the season in 2019, he had 53. He was on pace for about 40 in 2020. I think 40 is a realistic barometer that Pete could hit year in, year out. He's 3 years away from breaking the all-time franchise home run record. As long as they extend him, I mean, that record's going to be his. He has to stay healthy as well, but again, that has not been an issue for Pete at this stage of his career. 380 RBIs so far. David Wright has the record at 970, but you have Alonso is averaging about 116 RBIs a season. 5 more years of that would be 580 RBIs. Add that to the 380 he already has. You're looking at 960 RBIs, and that's 10 off from Wright. If he has a season or two better than the 116, if he brings that average up just a little bit more per year, he could theoretically be the all-time home run leader and RBI leader in 5 years' time. Total bases was another interesting one I wanted to look at. Pete Alonso, 1,050. David Wright, 1,585. That's second most. Ed Kranepool, I got my 2 stats confused there. Apologies. Total bases again, Alonso, 1,050. David Wright, 2,945. That was a little teaser. We're going to get to games played next. So a long way to go for Pete Alonso to overtake David Wright for total bases in a Mets career. He's almost 2,000 shy. With that said, Pete Alonso has been averaging 320 bases a season. So if he was to do that for 6 seasons, he'd be at 2,970. Point being, if Pete Alonso remains as productive as he has been throughout his career and continues to wear a Mets uniform for the next 6 seasons, there's a great chance he's going to lead this franchise in home runs, RBIs, and total bases. That alone puts you squarely in the conversation for being the best position player in franchise history. And then even just playing the most games is a crazy one to think about. Could Pete Alonso actually finish his career with the most games played? That's something that David Wright would have done had he remained healthy. He did not, so he ends up coming short of Ed Kranepool, who's at 1,853. David Wright at 1,585. Alonso at 530 through 4 years. He had some games cut out because he didn't get to play a full season in his second campaign in 2020. Assuming the world remains relatively normal, we continue to get normal baseball seasons, and Alonso stays healthy, you're probably talking 9 seasons to pass Ed Kranepool. We're discussing a potential 9-year contract extension. It's a possibility, but a little bit far-fetched that he could get there. Then you have David Wright at 7 seasons to pass him, which would be right in the window of that type of a contract extension. So I say all of these stats, and they're counting numbers, and they're not that important, but it's just to make it clear how open the record books really are for this franchise, particularly when it comes to position players. And this is, right there with David Wright and Darryl Strawberry for the best this franchise has ever produced. They had some great guys come in, obviously, with Mike Piazza and Carlos Beltran, who could be in the Hall of Fame with the Mets cap, joining Piazza, who already is in Cooperstown as a Met. But the homegrown guy that can play his career with the team and can really own the record books, Pete Alonso is that guy. I mean, Francisco Lindor is going to fall into the trade category with Piazza and Beltran. And Keith Hernandez, of course, absolutely worth mentioning, one of the greatest position players in franchise history. Gary Carter as well. But when it comes to slugging, it really hasn't been any better than what Alonso has done. He just has to do it for a bit longer. And just when it comes to overall play, I mean, you can envision the scenario. And that's why these are the guys you want to see signed. We've spoken ad nauseum about DeGrom this offseason. These are guys that will be Mets Hall of Famers that you want to see, 48 and 20, joining, Keith Hernandez, Mike Piazza, and Tom Seaver among their retired players' jerseys out in the rafters. I think these are guys that absolutely have a lot left in the tank when it comes to their Mets careers, and I just hope they are afforded that opportunity to play out their careers entirely in a Mets uniform. If I had to rank out the extensions that I want to see done this offseason, I've gone through 3 now over the past couple episodes. David Peterson, I think, is the best value proposition to be signed right now, and one the Mets should be hopping on. I think that Jeff McNeil is probably the most logical of the contract extensions to get hammered out based on, his desire likely to get that bag secured. Alonso is the one I most want to see done, but it's also the most difficult because he has now reached that stage of his career where he's going to be making north of $10 million through arbitration. He's going to do that for 2 years, and then he can be a full-fledged free agent. So I'm just not sure if he's going to want to even sign an extension at this point. You almost had to do it last year. Hopefully that's not the case, though, and these sides can work it out, and he can be secured in a Mets uniform for a very long time. We'll just have to see how the offseason ultimately pans out. That's going to be all, though, for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show, at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now, for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today, hosted by Peter Bukowski. Locked On Sports Today is where you go for all your instant game reactions, your breaking news, your take of the day. You can follow Locked On Sports Today on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts.